Thank you all for coming. We're just taking a couple more minutes because of the nor'easter we're experiencing, just to make sure that everyone has a chance to fight the winds and make it here. All right. I wish to welcome you to the second annual Destination World, powered by Pechakucha. This is a happening that is now in its second iteration, and it's wonderful to see so many of you willing to brave the elements of a New England fall to come and listen to 9 students this afternoon telling you about their international experiences. My name is Gavin Whitelaw, and I am the executive director of the Reischauer Institute of Japanese Studies, one of the 16 centers, programs, offices, and institutes sponsoring today's event. 2 years ago, a number of us here at the international centers at Harvard had an audacious idea, and that was to see whether a few of the undergraduates that we work with would be willing to publicly share their international experiences with an audience broader than just us and possibly their parents. As centers, we long knew that student stories were the most vivid, most articulate, and most compelling statement about the value of an international experience to an undergraduate education. Thanks to the inauguration of the Worldwide Week at Harvard, we had a chance to give it a try and scale it up. Then we had another audacious idea, and that was to limit each student to just 6 minutes and 40 seconds of airtime. 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide, a formula known as Pechakucha. The results have been, in one word, inspirational. Today, in less time than it takes you to walk from here to out-of-town news, as long as it lasts, each student will prove to you that an international experience is not an isolated, one-off occurrence. Rather, it is part of a larger process of exploration, of engagement, of discovery, and relationship building. An international experience is not separate from an undergraduate education. It is the essence of what makes college so vital and so meaningful. An international experience fuels curiosity, and it shifts our perspectives. We are delighted to have 9 students sharing their stories with you and want to thank all of them for making time to create and practice their talks and then stand up here and share them. Rest assured, this is not easy. We also want to thank the students who were willing to serve as understudies for today's event. Their support is also critical. The outpouring of interest from our students is the result of their desire to give back and to pay forward for the opportunities that have been given to them. We also want to recognize the centers, the institutes, programs, and offices that are participating in today's event, and the Engaging the World Information Fair held at Cabot Library this past Friday. These participating organizations include the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies, the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies, the Edwin O. Reischauer Institute of Japanese Studies, the Fairbank Center for Chinese Studies, the Harvard China Fund, Harvard University Asia Center, the Harvard University Center for African Studies, Global Support Services, the Korea Institute, the Lakshmi Mittal and Family South Asia Institute, the Minda de Grunsberg Center for European Studies, the Office of Career Services, the Office of the Vice Provost for International Affairs, the Program on U.S.-Japan Relations, the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, the Office of International Education, SEA, CEAS, and the Office of FAS International Affairs. Finally, we are delighted that Dr. Margot Gill, Administrative Dean for International Affairs at FAS, and Professor Mark Elliott, Harvard's Vice Provost for International Affairs, and the Mark Schwartz Professor of Chinese and Inter-Asian History are joining us and will be sharing a few words during today's program. We will be starting things off with an opening address from Dr. Margot Gill, and then move right to our 9 student presenters. There will be no breaks. Professor Mark Elliott will provide today's closing remarks, and then the entire audience is welcome to join us in the concourse for international foods and a chance to learn more about how our centers, programs, and offices can assist you in having an international experience during your time here at Harvard. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Gill.
Coordination is astonishing at Harvard. I am so delighted to be with you today, this afternoon. This, for many of us, is remarkable for many good reasons, especially this slide on the screen at the moment. It reminds me, and I hope it suggests to all of you, that Harvard's centers, our international centers, many of our offices at the college and within FAS, thought it important to coordinate our efforts, the idea that we could coordinate efforts, the idea that we would band together, that we would be good partners in this effort is something truly extraordinary at this institution. So let me say to you that I especially want to recognize Gavin Wylow. Gavin, you're going to stand if you would, because it is your efforts. Yes, you are. Yes. These sorts of activities, this event, really has depended on the goodwill and the efforts of all of our colleagues across our centers, and I see so many of them, of course, here to support our students and to support this effort. But there's always one person who steps forward to make sure that the organization of this kind of activity, as much as I can be delighted that there was coordination, one person, and that's Gavin, and that was true last year, and it is true again this year, who helps direct and shepherd and ensure that this kind of activity is not only smooth flowing, but that we all recognize how important this effort is in the context of this larger week. And I'm going to say one more word. So 1,000 thanks to Gavin and to all of our colleagues who are here representing all of these centers and these offices. It is because of our shared interest and our clarity about the importance of being able to both share and to demonstrate our students, our undergraduate students' interest in international experience. And that's what this event does in the most remarkable and profound way. I want to make sure that we remind ourselves of the context of this activity this year, as was true last year, as Gavin has reminded us. We're 3 years into this notion at Harvard that we would have a worldwide week. Many, fair to say most, of our sister institutions have something along the lines of a day of international education. Harvard, thanks to our Vice Provost's Office for International Affairs, had determined that there should be a week, and here's what's different, and it's going to be a word I'm going to say more than once in the next 2 minutes. And that's that rather than having specific designated events, we would ask all of the schools at Harvard, all of the participating student organizations, all of the centers, our institutes and centers, to think about what they might want to shine a bright light on during this special week, this worldwide week. And I think what you and we know is that's what's important, that we have an opportunity to say, here is, to our community and beyond, here's what it is that is a good representation of Harvard's interests globally. And that notion of there being an opportunity to just simply take a moment in our calendars, in our busy lives, to ensure that we understand how important international activity and our representation abroad, it is more important now, we all know that, than ever before. So this is a marvelous opportunity in the context of Worldwide Week for us to sum up just the best of stories from our students, from these designated students, what their experience abroad has been. I can't think of a better way to sum up this week, Worldwide Week. But I also want to say the partnership of the organizations that are listed here. What we had in mind, and it was true in the first of our Worldwide Weeks, it wasn't clear that the first of the Worldwide Weeks was fully visible to our undergraduate population. And so we decided that there would be a real partnership. First, in these bookends of activities during Worldwide Week, and Gavin has been good enough to mention that there was an earlier event last Friday that was meant to be engaging all of our undergraduates with the world. And it is really thanks to, and they might be willing to be recognized as well, especially to our Office for International Education, thanks to their astonishing efforts. And it's a partnership with Camille Washington is here as well from my office. It's a partnership to say, here's a way to put all of our centers and many of our departments together in one space, and this is what happened last Friday, to talk about what are the international opportunities. That doesn't happen easily at this institution, that there's one place where you can begin to demonstrate what are the opportunities for our undergraduates thinking about international experience. And you can see the bookend then is this really important set of conversations where there is then direct evidence of just how important and meaningful intellectually and personal growth. That's what we're going to hear from our students about their individual experience. So these were meant to be and are bookends of here is the bigger picture for other undergraduates, and very importantly, here is the real evidence of what the experience means as our students head out with support from their faculty advisors, support from all of our international institutes and centers. Very importantly, I hope you feel a support from everyone in this room, that these experiences are stories that I hope you will tell, of course, today to us. We will remember what you have to say. And I think if pressed, I think I can do just about every one of the talks from last year. That's the message that then many of us, when we go out to talk with our alumni, to talk with interested partners around the world about Harvard's interest and especially our undergraduate interest in the world, these are stories that I hope you will not only tell now, but I ask of you one thing. Keep telling your stories. Tell these stories to all of your peers. Tell these stories to others who will follow you at the college, because it's your inspiration. It's what you've done that makes very real in the Harvard undergraduate experience something very important about the bridges we form around the world, and very importantly, Harvard being both in the world and eager to bring the world to Harvard. 1,000 thanks to all of our student participants. Many thousand thanks to all of my partners in our international centers. This is precisely the kind of event that we mean to share in our community. Let's keep sharing that experience. That's your additional assignment. Thank you all for being participants, and thank you for letting me be with you today. It's marvelous. Thanks much.
Hello everyone, my name is Barnett. I'm a sophomore living in Dunster studying sociology, and today I'm excited to talk to you about my international experience in Hong Kong. So this past summer, I studied abroad with Harvard Summer School in Hong Kong with the help of the Harvard China Fund, and this was actually the first year of our program, so I'm so excited to tell you guys about it. We were graciously hosted by the local Hong Kong Baptist University, and during my time there, I took 2 classes, one about migrations and the other about the history of US and China, both of which are incredibly relevant topics since Hong Kong has historically been a site of many migrants and also a site of connection between Hong Kong, China, and the West. I decided to study in Hong Kong in part because of my personal connections to the region. I have relatives in Hong Kong as well as across the border in the mainland Chinese province of Guangdong. But to be honest, I actually didn't know a lot about it because most of the times I was in the region, I would just be with my relatives. So I was really excited to be there to learn about the area from an academic perspective. And so today I'm excited to tell you about what I learned during my time there and how the things I've learned in Hong Kong have changed the way I thought about my studies now. And I hope for all the students here that after this, you'll think about pursuing your own international experience. I have to admit that when I first got into Hong Kong, I was pretty anxious. I am not a really seasoned traveler, and I was pretty worried about spending 2 months in a city that I didn't really know that well. Luckily, I could speak a bit of the local language, so that helped me get around. And I decided to get over my fear by getting right into the city and learning about the city as much as I could. And I did that through my classes, through talking with my family and friends, and just like traveling around. And I really got to know the city beyond just tourism. And during my time in Hong Kong, I saw a city of many contrasts. One of those was the contrast between a city that was at once modern but also traditional. So one of our field trips actually was to one of the so-called walled villages of Hong Kong, which is on the right. And in this walled village, they actually still maintain many of the old traditions from their lineages, and we actually were able to visit one of their lineage halls, and afterwards enjoy one of the traditional meals called pun choi. On one of our other field trips, we traveled to the tip of the Kowloon Peninsula of Hong Kong and looked across the Victoria Harbor to the Hong Kong Island, where many of the corporate finance buildings are located. One of the other contrasts I noticed in Hong Kong was the tension between Hong Kong's colonial past and its influences from the West, as well as its current Chinese presence. And I think this most obviously played out in the recent Hong Kong protests. During my time there, I actually saw the protest began and then get more serious over time. And in these protests, these protesters were calling for democracy against China's increasing authoritarian rule, which really show the kinds of contrasts between Hong Kong's Western and Chinese influence. And finally, one of the last contrasts I noticed throughout my time in Hong Kong was kind of the very deep inequalities plaguing the city. One of our field trips we took with a local NGO to learn about the problems that refugees were facing. So we were able to actually visit one of the homes of the refugees they were serving. And this refugee in particular actually lived with 20 other people in what is often called the coffin homes of Hong Kong. But at the same time, we took a different field trip to the American Chamber of Commerce, where we were able to speak with the top business executives of Hong Kong about their perspectives on Hong Kong. So, after this trip, I realized that I had learned a lot about Hong Kong as a city, and through this journey, I really came to reflect on how the things I learned in Hong Kong might change how I approach my studies when I got back to Harvard. And during my time in Hong Kong, I noticed yet another contrast, one between the classroom and the city. One of my favorite parts of studying abroad is being able to connect the things I saw in the classroom with my experiences outside of the classroom. And I think sometimes in the world of academia, it's easy to become detached from the real lives of people because sometimes we forget that the issues we're talking about impact real people. And just an example, during my time in Hong Kong, we were able to visit one of many factories in the city of Dongguan, which is across the border from Hong Kong in mainland China. And this is a picture from one of the toy factories we visited. And it's in academia, we often talk about labor or manufacturing labor in the developing world, but to actually be there and see the kinds of working conditions that they were in was something else. In my migrations class, we talked about domestic workers in Hong Kong, but to actually be out there and see them gathering on Sunday afternoons was also a very different experience. So coming back to Harvard this fall, I've realized that I've taken a lot more from Hong Kong than just 2 classes. One, I learned that I could survive in a city and actually learn a lot about it. I learned to appreciate a city beyond tourism. I spoke and talked to friends and family in Hong Kong and learned more about the city that they are in. And finally, I learned a lot more about the kinds of cultures and connections that could be formed with people who are so different from me. And coming back to Harvard, I'm excited to continue seeing how my studies apply outside of the classroom. And so finally, I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has made this event possible and who has made my journey to Hong Kong possible, including the Harvard Summer School and the Harvard China Fund.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juliana Kardish. I am a senior studying a joint degree in social anthropology and visual and environmental studies. And tonight I'm sharing with you about my thesis research in Cape Town, South Africa. Thanks to the Center for African Studies, I was able to travel to Cape Town this past summer for 10 weeks to study the city's spatial apartheid and look into the social implications of what that means. I was specifically interested in how people were moving throughout the city and in current context of how they were moving in order to gain water. You may have heard of Cape Town in the last couple of years because there is a 4-year-long severe drought that the city has been experiencing. And in response to this drought, the city government instituted Day Zero, which is a citywide campaign to get people to cut down on their water consumption in fear of the dreadful day when the city would ultimately run out of water. During this time, water was rationed to 50 liters per person per day. People began to line up in long queues, waiting to fill up their bottles and containers from natural springs, and public taps were turned off. This was just over a year ago. Now, with an increase in rainfall and rising dam levels, the drought is no longer as big of an issue, and Day Zero no longer lingers in many minds. However, it became apparent that this environmental disaster no longer affected the white and wealthy population, but still affected those who were not living in certain neighborhoods. My research wanted to confront this issue of where you live in a city impacts what resources you have access to. Although the apartheid has ended in popular consciousness, cities are still largely segregated, and therefore where people, depending on someone's race or economic status, where they are living in the city determines their access to resources such as water. In conversation with land redistribution and dispossession, I was specifically interested in the rising number of the homeless population in the city. Specifically, I wanted to work with homeless women, for they were more vulnerable to the exposure of the environment. So during my summer, I interned at U-Turn Homeless Ministry for 10 weeks in order to meet these women and get to know them on a personal level. These interlocutors, I was really interested in their experiences of the city, how they collected water, the pathways they carved out throughout the city. And so to do this, we together began mapping out their pathways, where they went throughout the city. And so I used an alternative methodology of walking. Together, we walked throughout the city, and we were creating these maps together that I found were co-authored and collaborative. If walking is a way of being in the world, then it is a useful methodology to understand public space, which in theory is designed for all, but in actuality excludes the homeless population. Together with these women, we would start out from their informal sleeping settlements and travel throughout the city to other locations that were important to them. Some women served as domestic workers in wealthy estates. Some went to public libraries to educate themselves. Others went to churches to worship, and others went to parks to engage in drug and alcohol use. This is one of a draft of a map that we made documenting these important locations throughout the city from their informal sleeping settlements and all the pathways they took to navigate this segregated city. Because I was specifically interested in the water crisis, I also wanted to note locations where these women were getting water. Some of these sites included beaches, car washes, reservoirs, and even neighbors' hoses. Pictured here is a public surfing shower where many of the women bathed. However, during the drought, a lot of these showers were shut down, and the women resorted to using the ocean. Pictured here is a map of one of my interlocutors, Natasha, Each day we would walk from her informal living settlement in Camps Bay, where she slept in an overgrown bush, and we would walk along the waterway all the way to Bantry Bay, miles away, where she would do her washing in the ocean and daily bathing. Natasha, without any formal shelter or property, she would have to carry all of her possessions on a trolley. So we would walk along these paths, and one day she approached this beach to do her laundry when a cop became suspicious of her behavior. She noted that other surfers and beachgoers were free to leave their stuff out on the sand all day, and so she argued with him for quite a while until she set back out to complete her chores. And so for hours she was doing her washing while the cop observed us, and later on that day a surfer offered her money to go get bread from a local shop. She set out, leaving behind all of her clothes to dry on the sunny, warm rocks, and the officer chased after us, explaining that we could not leave things on the beach. However, Natasha said she had not eaten all day and she needed to take her health into consideration, so she was willing to take the risk. She set out for some food, and we returned back moments later to find all of her possessions in the world gone. This is just one story to exemplify the common occurrences of these women. Daily decisions of where to get water and when to get food impact their survival. These women must constantly renegotiate their role in society, as well as withstand exclusion from public space. I hope that my vignettes and written analysis, as well as the maps I made with these women, can recognize a socially invisible population. I hope these women can use this research to reincorporate themselves back into the social fabric. And I've been working with U-Turn Homeless Ministries, who has agreed to publish my findings and educate their readers, as well as the other citizens of Cape Town, hopefully informing the community of the grounded realities of these women, and in order to make more effective changes. I hope also, on top of all of this, that my research can inspire more creative solutions to redistributing resources in Cape Town. Thank you so much for your time.
My name is Olivia Fu, and I'm a current sophomore in Adams House. This summer, I had the incredible opportunity to study in Korea and visit Kazakhstan through Harvard, first with generous funding from the Korea Institute studying at Ewha Harvard, and then as part of the organizing team for the Harvard College Project for Asian International Relations. Today, I want to talk about my experience navigating Asia as an Asian American, which I think can be summed up by this photo. Here I am at the ripe young age of 5, stuck between the two humps of a camel at the Great Wall of China. On the one hand, I had my quintessential American childhood, growing up and going to school in the States. But on the other hand, my parents are from Hong Kong, and everything from language to food to traditions were all Chinese. As I entered high school, I was interested in learning more about the region that my parents came from and received a scholarship to study in Japan. It was the first time I had spent so much time away from home, and the first time I was so far out of my comfort zone. But it taught me a lot about where I fell in between these two divides. For the first time, I looked like the people around me, and I felt like I could fit in and gloss over my appearance. But on the other hand, I realized that fundamentally my values and understanding of the world were so different. So even though I could fit in, I didn't know what was going on half the time. And it taught me that I had so much to learn about the world. One of the most jarring experiences, however, was seeing history face me back in my real life. This is Okinawa Peace Memorial, where the victims of World War II from both the American and Japanese sides are all listed on these plaques. Now, having family killed in the war as well, it was incredibly jarring to see how my Chinese, American, and now Japanese experiences all intersected. The summer after, I spent a similar homestay experience in Jeonju, Korea, where I was living with a local host family and attending a local high school. It was interesting to see East Asia from a new lens, now through Korea. And although I still didn't know where I personally fit in as an Asian American there, it was an experience to learn about a different part of the region. Seeing the traditional houses, for example, juxtaposed with modern life was incredibly interesting to me. And it taught me a lot about language and culture, and taking traditional music classes there, for one, allowed me to experience Korea from the lens of history. But most importantly, it inspired me to look through Korean studies here on campus. and I spent this past summer studying with Ewha Harvard Summer School program. I was taking 2 classes at Ewha, one on the North Korean regime, and the other a Korean language class. The class itself was composed of 12 Harvard students and 14 Ewha students, so inherently there was opportunity for cross-cultural discussion. I also had a Korean roommate pictured here, and getting to understand college life from her perspective was incredibly eye-opening. I forget sometimes there's a world outside of Harvard, and be able to experience the life of a college student, eat local food, go to local events was really fun, but also taught me a lot about the cultural nuances of Korea. But what was perhaps the most important community through my classes was my Korean language class, pictured here, the 3 of us and our teacher. I found language to be one of the ways that I could connect with people, not just as an outsider through academia, but as a local student, really getting to talk to the people on the streets. Actually getting confused as a Korean person and getting asked questions in the street made me realize that I had come pretty far in my language skills and that I could actually apply my studies from the classroom to my conversations. We also made a very necessary excursion to the Gyeongbokgung Palace, wearing the traditional clothes and making some fun poses for the memories. But also understanding how tradition is still very central to Korean society today. The program also had some very exciting built-in field trips, and this was one to Jeju Island. And what was most important to me was realizing that the Korean culture is not one that is as homogenous or even the same across the entire country. Jeju, for example, is known for its water, wind, and statues. But another experience that taught me more about Korean culture was this class excursion to the Kiwoom baseball game, which fittingly has the same colors as Crimson. But getting to be a part of the local sports scene and chant along with all of their songs and understand how sports can bring people together across boundaries was incredibly important and inspiring to me. Also, this is the 1 Million Dance Studio, which you might have heard of, which I had seen on YouTube all across my feed. But actually getting to go there and dance was an incredible opportunity to see how the fusion of culture had come together at this one place. We have Korean choreographers with American music, foreign students coming to learn from these artists, and coming together in the joy of dance. My Chinese roots came back most strongly to me at this meal, where everyone here either spoke fluent Chinese or had Chinese heritage. And we were eating Chinese food that had been adapted by Korea and talking about Chinese issues through the lens of US and Korea, and understanding that made me realize that this is something I want to be more invested into. My American identity was most apparent to me when I visited the DMZ and the Blue Houses, just days after Trump and Kim had had their summit. It inspired me to go into diplomacy and understand how I can use my cultural backgrounds and my academic interests to bridge these cultural barriers for a better world. So I left the summer without any overarching revelation or epiphany about what it meant to be Asian American in Asia, but more so a newfound appreciation of cultural discovery and a new interest in learning more about how all of these countries can intersect, whether through politics, history, and society today. I ended my summer by visiting Kazakhstan, a region of the world that I had never been remotely close to. And I was here organizing a conference on international relations with a cohort from Nazarbayev University in Nur-Sultan. It was really interesting to think about how in this part of Eurasia, so many European influences as well as Asian influences came together to create this hodgepodge of different values and interests. The architecture, for example, as you can see here, had deep Islamic influences. And the people were equally had Asian backgrounds or from European backgrounds and held a key role in determining the future of Eurasia today. I'm interested going forward into learning more about this region, and especially as a region of growth, as China and Europe continue to grow as well. As I turn back to Harvard, I'm especially fond of and appreciative of how far Harvard has reached its arms around the world. If you can read Korean, this says Harvard, actually, and it talks a bit about how Harvard lessons are appreciated and listened to all around the world and how I want to be more part of it. My blockmate and I had met up here to read about Harvard through this Korean bookstore. But as I reflect on my summer in Korea and Kazakhstan, I'm appreciative of the opportunities I had to look on this journey of self-exploration. And overarchingly, it taught me the importance of cultural discovery and inspired me to pursue this path of learning how my identity fits in the world. Thank you.
My name is Oscar Schultz. I'm a sophomore in Adams House, and I study economics. And I spent my summer in 3 places, in Berlin, in Florence, and in London. And I want to talk about how my time in these places sort of shaped my understanding of diversity much better. So I also want to thank the Center for European Studies for funding my summer. As you've probably noticed by now, I'm not from America. I'm from Germany, specifically from a place called Cologne, Köln. And I'd never been to the US before coming to Harvard. And the place I'm from was very much like everyone looked the same, sort of. Everyone had the same background. My class, if you'd seen a class photo, everyone sort of looks the same. I come here to Harvard first time. A lot of things are different. And the one thing that stood out to me the most was the emphasis on diversity that we have at this university. So I get here, and I'm here. A lot of people from around the world are here. And I remember during my freshman week sitting in a big lecture hall, and people were talking about how important diversity was. So now I'm a huge proponent of diversity. I wouldn't be here without it. Why would you have a German just like that? But I always thought it's more like icing on the cake, right? You can say, oh, look, we have all these people from around the world because we're such a great institution. Everyone wants to come here. Fast forward a year, another thing that Harvard loves is summer internships. And I was stressing out about it a little bit and decided to go back to Germany, to Berlin, this is our capital, and intern at the parliament, at the Bundestag. And I was interning for a member of parliament called Johannes Vogel, that's him, who I'd actually met last semester at Harvard, at the Center for European Studies, where I was a program assistant. So I called Johannes up, I said, listen, I really need a job for the summer. Can you help me? And he said, of course, come around. And so I spent a month with him, 4 weeks in Berlin. I'd actually been to the Bundestag 3 years ago, participated in a program there. So I sort of knew what to expect, but not really. It turns out that working there is very different to just coming in for 4 days and feeling all important. The one thing that stood out to me the most was, again, how much people's opinions differ. And I would be finding myself sitting in rooms like this, and an expert would come in and talk, for example, about immigration. I would present data. And I would say, it's so obvious to us what we have to do. We need more immigrants. We need more people coming to us. And then next to me would be, someone who would say, completely the opposite. No immigrants, nothing like that. So I was baffled by this. I was thinking to myself, is that what diversity is? And if that's what diversity is, I don't really want it. That's really expensive to have. That makes us so inefficient, right? We can never decide on anything. Everyone in this photo probably has a different opinion. If that's the cost of diversity, in opinion, that's quite a cost, yeah. This is somewhat unrelated. This was my bike in Berlin. I bought it for 75 euros on the first day. It got stolen on the second day. So always lock your bike very carefully in Berlin. But the one day that I did have the bike, I really enjoyed riding around. And I loved the city, seeing the city. After that, I had to take the subway, which was horrible. But I decided, actually, that was great, having a bike. Why don't I do a bike trip? So I decided to do a bike trip after my time in Berlin. And I did it with a friend of mine from Harvard, Cameron, who is from London. And we did a bike trip from the south of Germany, over the Alps, all the way to Florence. A 2-week bike trip, 1,000 kilometers, on mountain bikes. And Cameron is from England, so grew up in a very different sort of setting than me. And here I am, the person who has been around the same people for 18 years in Germany. Everyone is sort of the same. All of a sudden, I spent 2 weeks exclusively with this person, completely different experiences, everything's different. And we had one night in particular, the first night, where we got stuck on a mountain on 2,000 meters. There was ice on the mountain, and it was in the beginning when we were starting the bike trip, it was 30 degrees outside, Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's hot. And there's ice on the mountain. We were freaking out. And me being a German, I'm like, listen, we need to get to the hotel. We said we would be at the hotel at 8 p.m. We need to get there. That's the plan. And he said, let's relax. Let's just take it slow, and let's make sure that we're safe. Eventually, we got to the hotel at 7 a.m. We spent pretty much the night on the mountain. 2 kilometers took us 8 hours. Well, we got there. Something bad could have happened to us on that mountain. No one would have known. Phones were dead, of course. No water. It was horrible. But we made it. That was me after 2 weeks, all washed up, but happy that I survived. And I was reflecting on it, and I was like thinking to myself, there were times where it was quite annoying that this guy just wouldn't understand what it means to say lunch at 2, as it is in Germany, and that you wouldn't end up having lunch at 2. But I learned from him as well, and I survived that first night. So I said, well, if that's what diversity is about, I kind of want more of that. So then I went to London. I decided, okay, now I can be civilized again. And I went to London and decided to intern at a private equity firm, which was right there next to Piccadilly Circus. And believe it or not, this was the place that really explained diversity to me. I would be sitting at this desk, and I would be seeing the Italians, 3 Italians sitting in one corner, joking around. I would be sitting across the Hungarian, people from Morocco. I asked them, why do you care so much about that? Why don't you just take people from Oxford? I mean, they're capable. They went to Oxford. And they said this, and this really explained it well to me. If we take people from Oxford, they might get 80% of the things right each time, but the same 80%, because they have the same perspectives. If we take people that might only get 75% right, 70% right, from all around the world, they get different 70% right? And we get closer to 100. All of us together, we can make better decisions. We can have a better time together. And so that was quite amazing to me that I would learn at a private equity firm what diversity actually means and make sense of my summer, of the experiences I had before. So then I jumped on a plane back to Harvard. Summer ended. And I came here a week early because I'm part of the Crimson Key Society that staffs the freshman week. So I was around the class of 2023 for a week. And I remember walking past them and seeing them at a diversity event and listening to all these people talk about how great it is, how many different people we have here and why that is important. And I thought to myself, I hope these guys get it quicker than I did, because the diversity that we have here is so great. We take it for granted. We don't even realize what it means, but it's such a great thing and it's such an important thing. Thank you.
My name is Wesley Cook. I'm a senior doing social studies and East Asian studies. And I want you to start by imagining with me that you, like me, are fresh off the airplane in Tokyo, having spent the last 16 hours of your life in a metal tube. You're tired, and you've got a long journey ahead of you. You've got about an hour and a half from the airport to Tokyo Station, where you're going to get on a bullet train for the next 3 hours. Once you get off the bullet train, you're going to spend another hour and a half in a car. Finally, you're going to arrive here. This is Rikuzen Takata, Iwate Prefecture on the northeast coast of Japan. As you can see, it's a beautiful place, and I fell in love immediately with the region when I got there. I spent the past 2 summers there, first doing an internship, and this past summer doing thesis research. I'll tell you a little bit more about both of those experiences over the course of the next 6 minutes. I really can't say enough good things about the geography of the place. I fell in love with the setting. This picture particularly I took because it struck me like a fairy tale land. Like I couldn't believe that I was somewhere this beautiful. It was really kind of an accident, though, that I stumbled into this city. Indirectly, it was because of this man, who's a representative in the Japanese Diet. I hoped to intern with him the summer after my sophomore year. And I thought I had a connection. I thought everything was lined up. And then fortunately for him, and less fortunately for me, he became the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Japan and stopped taking interns. So instead, the Reischauer Institute connected me with these men. On my left in this picture is Kiyoshi Murakami, special advisor to the mayor, and on my right is Futoshi Toba, the mayor of Rikuzen Takata. So we set up an internship for 2 months at the city office, and I got to do a number of different things. One of the highlights for me was exploring the city's industry. So this is me on a fishing boat with a handful of other people. Fishing and the aquaculture industry generally, oyster cultivation, seaweed, things like that, are a huge part of the economy of Rikuzen Takata. Unfortunately, the ocean is much more than just a source of economic revenue. It's a source of tragedy. In 2011, the city was hit with a 17-meter tsunami. It's about 55 feet. And the whole downtown area of the city was wiped out completely. No buildings taller than 3 stories survived. 1 in 12 residents of the city lost their lives. And you can see well in this picture the devastation. This is actually several months after the disaster. Initially, everything was covered with debris. Tree trunks, cars, houses, just scattered about everywhere as far as you could see. And I heard during my time at the city office a lot of personal firsthand stories of tragedy. I also heard a lot of very inspiring stories, though. This is one of my favorites. This is a conveyor belt. It's about 2 miles long. They set it up to cart dirt from a mountain. They lopped off 300 feet of a mountain, carted it across the river on this conveyor belt, and dumped it in the former downtown area of the city to raise the elevation of the whole thing by about 10 meters. This is the city more or less as it looks right now. As you can see, it's come a long way from 2 slides ago. Recovery is still ongoing, but it's really inspiring to see how far it's come. One of the things that struck me most during my internship was learning about disaster firsthand, that it wasn't just something I saw on the news, it was something that I experienced, or at least got to know the people who had experienced. And then I got to know disaster personally in a little bit different way when I came back. The fall of my junior year, last year, my hometown of Woodland Hills, Utah, was the site of a large wildfire. This is the mountain behind all of our houses that you can tell is on fire. My family and about 6,000 other people in our community had to evacuate for a period of about 2 weeks. Fortunately, unlike in other places like Paradise, California, in this case, the fire was contained, no lives were lost, and no structures were damaged in the end. But my family and our whole community was overwhelmed with the amount of support that came in from friends and neighbors and other people across the state. And I was really struck by this idea of community support and social ties in the context of recovery after disaster. And I wanted to make that the topic of my thesis. So I decided to go back to Ricos and Tocata to conduct research about the ways that people's social ties had affected their recovery after disaster. My topic then focused in a little bit more on community groups, and particularly the celebration of tradition and how that's changed after the disaster. You can see here the frame of a float and the filled out float. This is for a Japanese holiday called Tanabata. Every year in August in Ricos and Tocata, they celebrate this by bringing together groups from communities to make paper decorations and signs, and it's really an elaborate event that requires an awful lot of work from a lot of people. I got involved in these groups, got to know the people who were participating, hear their stories, learn their backgrounds, and it was a tremendously rewarding experience. I got involved as well in another group or set of groups celebrating community festivals for another holiday called Obon, where they'd put together a night of song and dance and food and drink, just as an opportunity for the community to gather and to celebrate holidays together. And if you'll indulge a little bit of a cliche, one thing that I had learned that really struck me during my time there and involvement in these groups was how important it is for me to step back and smell the flowers, to take time to appreciate what I was doing and the people I was with. One thing in particular that I loved about being involved in these groups was I got to know people that I otherwise never would have met. This picture shows 2 men. One is a vendor at the local supermarket. The other is a government employee who works on a boat measuring chemical levels in the ocean. And they came together in the context of building the decorations for these floats. And then there's me from Utah, a Harvard student, also in the mix there. There was a wide array of people that I got to meet, and that was very rewarding. My favorite people that I met there were my host family. They were easily the most rewarding part of the experience for me, building a relationship with them and enjoying the time that I had with them. And they taught me, I think, an important lesson that was really my big takeaway from the time that I've spent in Ricos and Tocata, which is, as nice as it is to have time to slow down and smell the flowers, it's even better to take time to plant flowers and to cultivate the kind of beauty and the kind of joy that I wanted to see in the world around me. And I'm very grateful for the funding from the Reischauer Institute and the chance that Harvard has provided me to learn that lesson, to go abroad, and to have those experiences. Thank you.
My name is Dasha, and I'm a student concentrating in Slavic studies and art, film, and visual studies. I was able to go to Volgograd, Russia because of the Davis Center Goldman Grant. This is Galina, or if you're her friend, Galia. I am her friend. I was also her roommate for the first month of summer, which meant her friends were my friends, her home was my home. She even told me that I could use any of her clean underwear at any point. So our shared home was in Volgograd, Russia, And like all good roommates, we quickly merged into one being, by which I mean I adopted all of her habits, namely her posture, her insatiable love of gossip, and her morning routine. At age 19, I became a Russian babushka. A babushka is an old woman, not the scarf. Thank you, Donna, for that distinction. Right, so our morning routine. 5 a.m., Galia wakes up, goes into the kitchen, starts blasting Russian TV throughout the tiny apartment. 5:02 a.m., I hobble into the kitchen, start messing around with my film equipment. By 7 a.m., Galia has descaled 3 fish, probably baked 80 blinis, and started a broth for our lunchtime soup. By 7 a.m., I am likely still fumbling with my same film equipment. Now at 7, we get dressed up in our finest clothes because it is market day, and market day is a big deal. It's a big deal. Galia pretends that she goes to the market to barter for better milk prices, but in reality, it's to gossip. The drama of Volgograd, Krasnoarmeyski region lives and dies at the Volgograd market. So it's a big day for her. It's an even bigger day for me because the market is where I discover what the rest of Volgograd thinks of me. This is a big deal. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. I'm naive, but I am not so naive as to think that Volgograd is anxiously awaiting a talkative American girl with a film camera and some elusive artistic mission. I am not that naive, seriously. So I tell Galia she can introduce me however she wants. A little bit of context. I am from Montana. My parents are from Montana. I'm American. I own a truck. You get it. Galia lives in a part of Russia where people's only experience of Americans is through their TV sets. So I have this one saving grace, which is that I can fake it. I can fake being Russian. It sounds bad, but sometimes it's necessary. Galia knows this about me. She knows that I lived there when I was a little kid. My name is Russian. I speak Russian. So she has the option to introduce me however she wants. A year ago, I visit her. We turn up to the market. She is excitedly parading me around as her American granddaughter. I'm not her granddaughter, but it got her a whole lot of social clout. The next year, this past summer when I came, I come up with my big film camera, and she starts introducing me as her Russian granddaughter from the St. Petersburg Film Academy. I don't even know if there is a St. Petersburg Film Academy. I should check. Apparently, I'm enrolled there. But I ask her, I'm like, Galia, why? Like, I understand, but why? Her voice kind of drops. She tells me that things have changed in the past year. Okay. 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 I'm actually kind of excited to embody this Russian identity. Yeah, like I am excited to be accepted. I'm excited to be a local, and I'm not. I'm not a local at all. My Russian city girl identity is met with more animosity and hostility than my American identity ever was. And that's where you have it. It's internal politics. City versus provinces, Russians versus Russians. Montana, right? I'm the one who's used to being from the disgruntled rural population. Not this time. I was the city girl penetrating a space that did not belong to her, and it was so important for me to experience. The other little experience was the third roommate. It wasn't just me and Galia. There was a third roommate. He's small, gray, old, and here's the reveal. Yeah, he's a TV set. He is blasting government-sponsored channels from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. We watch, oh my God, we watch everything. Ukrainian politics, Russian politics, cute kids singing, soap operas, this one really sexist sausage commercial that comes on every hour. Tons of Putin, tons of Putin. And after a little while, I actually feel myself starting to adopt some of the rhetoric from these TV shows. That's a whole other can of worms. I'd love to talk about it afterwards. TV talk is not the only new speech pattern I gain. Galia realizes after some time that my city girl identity that we've concocted for me is not making me any friends. So she decides to do a rapid U-turn and, okay, we're gonna make you into a local. Like, you're gonna talk like a local, you're gonna act like a local. She starts our daily lessons. This is not just for the PowerPoint, this is a real thing we did. Daily lessons in the art of cussing and insulting village style. I don't know that many dirty jokes, but every single one I learned from an 86-year-old Russian woman. Also talk to me about that afterwards. I'm trying to keep it PG up here. Right, so where does she get this confidence from? She is the most adaptable woman I have ever met. And it actually shouldn't be a shock. She's an 86-year-old woman with an enduring Soviet mentality. She survived the Battle of Stalingrad as a child, the bloodiest battle of World War II. She came back, rebuilt the city, lived through multiple regimes, lived through the fall of the Soviet Union, the crisis, inflation. Now, amongst her friends, she counts young Tatar gangsters. These are some of her 20-year-old young men are some of her best friends. Don't get me wrong, she loves her market babushkas, but don't you dare pigeonhole her into that category. No. Her best friend in the entire world is Amir, the butcher from Kazakhstan, who walks around with his belly hanging out and bloodied hands at his sides. Where does she get her confidence from? The key to this I discovered in a scrapbook hidden in her room. There's an image of it right there. Turns out Galia was one of the head administrators at the Volgograd shipbuilding factory during the USSR. And this scrapbook that her secretary made for her when she retired it's beautiful and funny and so full of love. It's full of letters and notes and jokes and her head pasted onto Soviet swimsuit models. It's probably the most loving thing I have ever held. And in holding it, I come to this kind of startling realization about my own prejudice, which is that I'm shocked that she had this whole other life. Like, I cannot even comprehend that my Galia, my spunky little Russian best friend, had this whole life as a revered professional. That shouldn't come as a shock, right? But it does. She had this life where she, made toasts and drank vodka and sang Russian war songs where she commanded and people stood to attention. Realizing this about Galia was not just a realization about her life, but it actually radically transformed the way that I look at the people in my life, particularly the older people in my life. Now, I don't like giving advice because I find people don't love giving advice from 20-year-olds, but now that I am an old Russian babushka, I feel comfortable offering up the following. Get out of Harvard. Pick a place. I'm serious, get out. See, all these guys are nodding with me. Pick a place, but more importantly, pick a person. It could be someone in Alston, it could be someone in Kolkata. Make sure that what you bring to that person is not politics or judgment or even good intentions. That's all too complicated. Just bring your humanity and be ready to receive theirs. Thank you to the Davis Center Goldman Grants.
Hi, my name is Russell, and I'm a senior at the college now, doing a special concentration in geography and development. And I'm here speaking on behalf of a lot of amazing experiences that I've been able to have. So I was told not to do all my shout-outs during the presentation, but thank you to all the people who've supported me in this room. Now I'm going to talk about what the many international experiences that led to my thesis research, which looks at gorillas in an international perspective and tries to consider basically the many ways that we can look at a single animal species, which have been so important to our science, to the way that we define humanity, but also to the daily lives of Rwandan, Congolese, and Ugandan people. But this all starts, weirdly enough, with a Reischauer internship at the Asian Development Bank Institute in Japan. And it was an amazing experience. It was really out of my comfort zone. I'd never been to East Asia before. This was after my first year at Harvard. I wanted to get out and see the world, and I wanted to study development economics. It was an amazing experience, but I very quickly learned studying Central Asian financial inclusion from a skyscraper in Tokyo wasn't really getting me any of the intimacy or any of the kind of real world material realities that I was trying to sort out for these people from far, far away. So I decided not to study economics, and I decided to stop working in skyscrapers, at least for a little bit. The next summer, I ended up working with the MIT Development Lab and the International Food Policy Research Institute, working in rural Uganda to better understand the efficacy of basically a localized innovation that tried to work through the inherent skills that farmers had to create solutions that weren't being solved by Western technology. This led to me going to 8 rural districts with 8 spoken languages, 8 different translators, and interviewing over 100 farmers that summer, and basically learning that all of the complexity that I was once missing, I had definitely found through this sort of field work. It also showed me kind of this hint of, this is a gorilla ear, I realize that's not a super clear picture. It exposed me to this sort of phantom of the gorilla, which was this thing that being a white American working in rural Uganda, people were like, why are you here and why aren't you going and seeing the gorillas? Because there's a $650 1-hour pass to go see gorillas that every single person pretty much who comes to Uganda looks at, but Ugandans never see them. Fast forward, I end up starting my thesis research this J term, so we're now in year 3 in experience 3, where I went off to Belgium, and I was working at the Colonial Museum for Central Africa that has changed its name about 100 times. And I was focusing on this experience of the human zoo, which happened in 1897, and it was part of Leopold II's very early colonial propaganda, where he brought 267 Congolese people to Belgium for the World's Fair, and had so much success at using this to rationalize civil colonialism that he actually built the museum I was working at for it. I started to tease out this interesting and complicated question of how scientific racism came from this understanding of Africa, and also how scientific racism was used to rationalize the colonial project in Africa. I ran into a lot of problems, though. I went and reached out to about probably 30 professors and academics and researchers. The only one who responded to me was an American, and he very quickly said, I'm assuming no one else has talked to you. That is because I used the term racial science, and in France, there's like race is sort of a dirty word. Comparatively, it's largely coming out of Vichy era issues. And I basically learned that no one was going to respond to me, so I had to get more funding to go back when it was much sunnier, and I started my summer there as well. So I went back to Belgium and was able to actually get my interviews, get my research done, and work through some of the challenges of racial politics in a place that I thought would be really similar to my American context and was radically different. Then I switch gears and go straight from there down to Rwanda, where I spent the rest of my summer working more specifically on the conservation end of this larger thesis that tries to bring scientific racism from the 1800s into present guerrilla conservation context. It's a big challenge, and one of the biggest challenges was the switch in transportation. I had my nice underground trains and my overground trams, and I switched to motorbikes and minibuses. But beyond that, I also switched into a really, really difficult environment for intellectual research, academic work, where the Rwandan government takes a lot of control over what can and can't be done. So I'm trying to do my research. I'm running into a lot of challenges. I very quickly realized that I won't even be able to begin to get at the truth, which is very hard to find there, without doing everything off the record, without meeting everyone in private, and actually having to download a separate app to meet anyone because the government tracks WhatsApp. I had to affiliate also with the Center of Excellence in Biodiversity, which is in the southern part of Rwanda, and I was able to give this presentation on sort of the historical end of my research in a room of local conservationists, which was a crazy kind of experience of figuring out how to tell this research to them, to Europeans, to my American Harvard funders, to you all now. And I hit the boiling point, which was that this was a volcano I hiked to, but it was also this moment where I actually was received with a lot of scandal, and the government came to my presentation. They tried to shut it down. Then they were not very happy with me, but luckily I was leaving about 2 days later. But they were really unhappy with the word colonial being used in the conservation conversation. For me, I was like, this is really obvious. I'm implicating this long and complicated history that really has never done any good to Rwanda and has undermined the work of Rwandans. But their immediate assumption was that an American was going to come, talk about colonialism, and basically give all of the credit of the entire conservation effort, not to the post-independence workers, but to the colonial period. So I saw yet again that this was colonialism and racial science and all of these terms that I studied from afar, and then learned that they were kind of complicated in Europe. But then I went here and saw that these have real material consequences for the people that I was working with. So now I'm faced with this enormous challenge, which I'm just getting into, which is how to write a thesis and how to continue with my research afterward in a way that resonates with my American colleagues, but also with this European context where these terms are really sensitive and all really different, but also in rooms full of people who grapple with these issues every day and who have never had a good interaction with this kind of ongoing history of the way that their history has been told. So go abroad.
Hi, everybody. My name is Danny Perez, and I'm a junior here at the college studying history and literature with a secondary in film and video. And today, I really want to talk to you about two experiences that I've had abroad that have changed the way that I think about my roots, my academics, and the relationship between those two things. So one of the first things that you should know about me is that I'm from Venezuela. I was born there and moved to the US with my family when I was 6 years old, and grew up in a very small rural town in Minnesota, where over time I began to lose my sense of Venezuelan identity, especially when I stopped being able to go there about 6 years ago. So when I first got to Harvard, one of the main things that I wanted to do was get back in touch with Latin America in an attempt to feel closer to a home that I felt so far away from. And so I started doing this by taking part in programs through the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies. And the 4 programs that I have done have basically taken me all over the region. But the 2 programs in particular that I really want to talk to y'all about today are the winter that I spent in Mexico and the summer that I spent there as well. And these programs are really close to my heart because they helped me feel much more grounded in my sense of identity and community, and ended up changing the track of my studies here at Harvard as well. So I applied to the Mexico internship program kind of on a whim. I decided to do an internship that had absolutely nothing to do with anything that I was studying, but I saw it as a time to explore. So I started doing an internship with a nonprofit and documentary film festival called Ambulante, which strives to bring documentary film to parts of Mexico where it's not typically accessible. So my job at Ambulante was to watch documentaries that would be featured in their film festival and write reviews on them, like this documentary up here, which is called America. And this is a job that I soon fell in love with. A lot of the films that I had to watch were about pressing social issues in Mexico, and I soon began to see documentary film as a powerful tool for social change. My favorite part of the job, however, were the people. I got to work with an incredibly tight-knit group of people who were passionate about social change and education and community engagement, and they really made me feel encouraged and loved as a coworker, but also as a friend. And in fact, I felt so encouraged that I decided that I wanted to try out making documentary film for myself. So this is actually my first documentary project. It was 5 minutes long, and basically I wanted to make the kind of films that I saw at Ambulante, which strive to focus on communities and people and social change. So fast forward about 2 months, I'm pretty sure that I want to bless you, to do a secondary in film and video studies, and I'm also pretty sure that I want to go back to Mexico City. So I signed up for the summer study abroad program at Colegio de Mexico, which basically gave me the opportunity to take 4 courses over the course of 5 weeks. And one of the courses was taught by this incredible professor whose class was about migration from Central America to Mexico to the US. And this class very soon became my favorite class, not just in the program, but my favorite class I've ever taken. It was centered on this intersection of art, activism, academics, and policy, and it viewed migration through that lens. And the professor centered the class not just on theory, but on people and communities. And I was so inspired because I had never really encountered this. This professor in the class inspired me at a time when I was particularly disenchanted with academics and the distance that I had witnessed that it had from marginalized communities, and especially communities that I was a part of as well. But I left this program with this vision of academics that are activism-oriented and community-centered, and I hope that I could bring this back to my academics at Harvard as well. So this program kind of transformed the way that I approached my studies, but it was transformative in other ways too. I was in Mexico City with 8 other people, none of whom I really knew that well, but who ended up becoming my family for the summer. I particularly got close with 3 other students on the program, Xochitl, Osvaldo, and Sammy, who were friends who shared more intersections of identity with me than like any of my friends did. And they're the kind of friends who just like make you wonder how you ever did life without them. They're also the kind of friends that I never really had to explain parts of myself to. They just understood. I also found a really solid sense of family with my host family. Pati was my host mom. This is not her above. And her kids, Joaquin and Adriana, were like my big siblings who helped me navigate the city. And of course, their dog Cookie was my companion every single night. And so my time in Mexico City was a time to build these beautiful new relationships, but it was also a time to delve into old connections that I had made during the winter. So this is Lulu, one of my coworkers from Ambulante, and it was just beautiful to come back to a city that I had never visited before, that winter, and realize that I had all these beautiful forms of community there already. So the more time that I spent in Mexico City, the more that I started to feel at home there. And to me, home isn't just a familiar place, but it's an environment where you feel supported and loved, where you're with people that you really care for, and a place that helps you to grow in ways that you didn't even know that you needed to. And that was Mexico City for me. So my internship program there inspired me to make documentary film a central part of my life. This is actually my second documentary project that I'm working on right now, and it's about a community of queer Christians in Minneapolis, my home. And this has inspired me also to just like keep making academic and artistic work that is centered on the communities that I most cared about. My summer in Mexico City specifically really gave me and blessed me with this new little family that I get to bring back to campus, relationships that I get to like deepen during my time here, and people who really helped me to feel so much more affirmed in my own identities. So going back to that first picture, I think about the fact that I started doing doctor class programs to try to feel closer to this home that I really missed, but I never could have imagined the many different kinds of home that I would find along the way, and that I feel extremely thankful for. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Barnett. I'm a junior in Adams House studying religion and comparative literature. And this summer I participated in a Sanskrit program offered by the American Institute of Indian Studies in Pune, Maharashtra. And it was an intensive 8-week language course designed to give students a much more holistic exposure to the language. So this summer was not actually my first time in India. My family is from Gujarat. And so I've long since been influenced by South Asian linguistic and cultural heritage. But this was my first time arriving in India on a student visa as opposed to a tourist visa. And this was my first time being there in its own context as a student of a language as opposed to a granddaughter and a niece and a cousin. And it wasn't until I had really been there on its own terms that I truly began to understand the beauty and nuance of a language like Sanskrit, which I had not really realized in the context of the Western Academy here. And living alone in a context that was once familiar but then becomes unfamiliar can be a little bit overwhelming, but as I realized gradually, Pune is a very beautiful city. Pictured here is a view from my host family's apartment building. And it's a really wonderful place to study because it's both an IT hub and a cultural capital. So it's a really rigorous place, a huge university-going populace. So every morning I would hail a rickshaw from right outside the apartment complex and travel here, Deccan College, where I would have 4 classes every day, whether on topics like grammar, writing, reading, etc. And the foliage was very beautiful in the monsoon season. On top of those classes, we would also, with our classmates, reenact scenes from epics like the Ramayana, which I had previously only read from before. So this live component, the interactive component, was something that I had not done before. We also learned to keep journals in Sanskrit, so we were producing thoughts in a language that's considered ancient, which was also very new to me. Of course, there were also exams, but the format always made it possible to do more than is expected here, which is more than just recognizing frozen written forms, but actually producing thoughts in paragraph form or orally. We also went on various field trips that intuitively don't seem related to a language, but actually framed the way that the program sort of approached the language. So this is a procession of very famous monastic sandals that passes through the city, and people took almost as many pictures of us as a huge group of American students as they did of the procession. So why these many field trips that initially don't seem to have much to do with the language? Well, I realized through the program that though Sanskrit is traditionally associated with ritual and erudition, it's still very much a language of the people. And so Sanskrit adds to its lexicon words like radio and cell phone as they become cemented into everyday vocabulary. And this building houses a project. It's a dictionary project that basically traces change in meaning over time, which is not something that dictionaries generally do. And so we toured the scriptorium, from which there are around 1,500 books, and basically every single word is taken, classified, documented, and then stored here in the scriptorium, where it's eventually worked on in its appropriate volume. And I was determined to find my name in the scriptorium, and I was assured by the directors that it would be there. And sure enough, I found over 15 slips with my name on it that had been documented actually some over 50 years ago, but I was still allowed to sift through these slips with my bare hands, and nobody was shooing me away. And I think the reason is that although there is a conception that Sanskrit is a language to be venerated and in a very traditional setting, it's still very much a language to be interacted with. And so I could walk through the library and find an aisle that had a section on classical hermeneutics and also modern sports in the same vicinity, because the contemporary life has so much bearing on the way that the language is taught and studied now. Pune is also a city with an incredible history. Pictured here is the Aga Khan Palace, where Mahatma Gandhi was famously under house arrest and where his ashes are now kept. And I got a chance to see so many forts and palaces that are characteristic of the city due to its Maratha history. And I got to do so with my classmates, and I've as of yet said very little about them, but it makes such a difference to learn these wonderful things about a language and to do it alongside people who share a passion for immersion in culture. So these are my friends, Emily and Julia, and they came to the program with such incredibly different backgrounds than I did, and yet that made my experience there so much more full. So they would tell me about their experiences growing up in Kerala in an ashram, or studying abroad in Pakistan during a politically tumultuous time, learning ancient Indus Valley civilization scripts, studying astrological charts, and so many different things, and it made so much more full my study of a language that can otherwise be very much in the books. I also interacted with a lot of older graduate students who were at the same program. They shared their recipes with me. They told me what it's like to apply to PhD programs in the humanities. They taught me how to mix honey into tea and so many other things. And they really made it possible for me to maintain a sense of my own identity while also being immersed in study abroad. So the completion of my program certainly does not mark the end of language study. I hope to continue that here at Harvard. But I do want to say that studying abroad in the language's own context makes it possible to sort of crystallize one's own interests. And I've now realized that I'm interested in studying religious practices as they relate to language, due to this beautiful temple that I had the privilege of visiting regularly, just because it was close to where I was staying, which is very much a beautiful thing about studying abroad. So for that, I would like to thank the Mittal Institute and the American Institute of Indian Studies, but also very much my teachers in Pune, who might never be applauded in a big auditorium like this one, but certainly deserve it for giving students like me the opportunity to see beyond the study of language in books and look instead to a wide horizon of possibilities. Thank you.
So I've been given the delightful task of wrapping this up and of extending an invitation to everybody to join us all in the International Food Fair that is about to take place outside in the hallway. My name is Mark Elliott. I serve as the Vice Provost for international affairs at the university, and I also teach Chinese history in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And I still teach, even though I have this administrative role. The event today, which is largely the brainchild of Gavin Whitelaw, and is made possible by the tremendous support of all of the international and area centers, each of which has been singled out here today, is part of Worldwide Week, which, as you may have heard, is something that we began in my office a couple of years ago to try to shine a bright light on all the different ways that Harvard is international. My office is basically charged with taking Harvard out to the world and bringing the world into Harvard. And the experiences that we have heard about here just now are maybe the most powerful evidence, I think, of how important it is for us, as I think it was Dasha who said, to get out of Harvard. There used to be a store, a travel agency, those of you who've been here a while may remember, on JFK. It's gone now because we don't need travel agents anymore since we all have computers and kayak. And it used to say, go away, often. And that is, I think, something that is a message that you have all really taken to heart. And you can do it in different ways, right? We have heard about people going to study in a more traditional sense, going to a summer school, one of the great many summer school programs that we run. Or perhaps it's to go to do senior thesis research. We heard about some of those experiences here. It may be to go to work. There's increasing popularity. Somebody pointed out how Harvard students, undergraduate students, love internships so much. But maybe doing them in a slightly different way appeals to the sense of adventure that we hope the university not only doesn't manage to extinguish completely, but that it manages to encourage and to foster. There's a lot of creation going on in the summer. We saw people with cameras, people making films, but I think the universal thing here really is the process of self-discovery. I mean, it's a cliche to say when we travel abroad, the thing that we're really learning about is ourselves. Just because it's a cliche, though, doesn't make it any less true. And as I was listening just now to Pranati's presentation, I was thinking back on my own first extended time abroad, which was more years ago than I care to remember, as a student at a language school in Taiwan, where I was thrown in with a bunch of strangers who later became friends for life, teachers who became friends as well, and established contacts and a kind of familiarity with a culture that was originally nothing to do with me, but which gradually became my own and made my life much, much richer for that. The transformation, we all know Dean Khurana's famous emphasis on the transformative experience of education, but how much less effort it requires to get that if you just get on a plane and then be sure to get off the plane and get on a bike, or even better, to go on foot. I wrote down this line about, this was Juliana. Where's Juliana? Walking as a way of being in the world. I really, really like that. And I think we all know, all of us here travel, you know how it is when you get to a new city or a city you've been to many times. You don't really feel like you've arrived until you're actually out on the street and you're walking, right? It's not the same if you're in a car or even in the subway or a bus. And the kind of discoveries that come to you when you're walking only come that way, and that is such an important thing to learn. And then all the intellectual lessons, the politics and culture, the environment, social justice. I mean, there was a long, long list here. Everywhere, though, we go, we find new friends. It's the people we meet who change us, and maybe if we bring our humanity with us, we can change them too. And then, and I'm going to end with this, of course, one of the greatest delights, really, about traveling the world and getting out of our comfort zone, a phrase that we heard many times, is the food, right? Let's not be shy about that. Let's be brave enough to tell the truth that one of the glories of going to new places is discovering. Of course, it's the beauties of nature and the wonderful people we meet, but also the amazing foods and sometimes scary things that we're asked to drink and eat. I think, I hope anyway, we will never be too afraid, too shy to try everything at least once, right? So I want to congratulate all of our presenters on a job well done. I love this event because it's totally on time, unlike many events I run anyway. And because it provides us such a wonderful window into the variety and the tremendous challenges that come our way and that enrich our education and enrich this institution when you all come back here and share your stories with us, with your friends, and your roommates and so on. So thanks again. Thank you very much to the International and Area Centers who do so much to enrich the lives of our undergraduate students. And I want to give a special shout out to the Center for African Studies, which originally had this room and this space at this time and graciously allowed us to come in here and make use of it. So thanks very much. And with that, I think we have some delights waiting for us in the hallway. Thanks so much for coming.